What parts of a fic are the hardest to write for you? I imagine this differs significantly between writers, but I've found a pretty drastic difference in how quickly or smoothly I can get through parts of stories, depending on what they're about. Dry humor, dumb witty asides, internal monologue, and streams of consciousness. 1,000 words an hour. Look at me go. Whee! Feelings. Hesitates for 15 minutes, hovers over the keys, hesitantly presses E. Deletes it. Romantic feelings. The same as above, but along with the E, deletes an entire paragraph before the point of typing, walks away from keyboard, and dunks head in the sink. What are the parts of fics you just can't write quickly? Credit to Reddit user Set of Dogs for starting this thread on the fanfiction subreddit. And let's go read some answers. Dialogues. How do I make it sound like them in English when I watched it in a different language with subtitles? Ugh. You've described a very specific mood that I had completely forgot about until now. Consuming foreign content and trying to map character voices onto their English dialogue equivalents really is pain. Describing clothing, especially medieval-style clothing. Only so many times you can describe the vague silks and doublets before it becomes repetitive. Can't do descriptions worth a damn. I only describe scenery as strictly necessary. The rest is dialogue, physical action, and introspection. Heavy angst. Mainly because I write 1 or 2 paragraphs and then take a break to cry. I'm currently working on a heavy angst / depressing chapter in general at the moment, and it will probably take me 2 or 3 weeks to get through it at this rate. I find the segue parts of the chapter the hardest to write, when you need to explain what happens in a time skip in a succinct but narratively interesting way. I just want to move from one interesting scene to the next, but I need to say what happens between them? What a scam. Depending on your writing style, it could work without. I've read a couple of really good timestamp style fics where you're just meant to assume that boring life stuff is happening in between. It's not explicitly stated. The author just used, "It was 2 extraordinarily boring weeks later until he saw him again," and similar things as bridges between scenes. Probably motivations and stuff to justify it, but once you know the motivations, you can focus on the content you actually want to write. I don't enjoy trying to think of reasons readers will think are good enough. I just want to get it out of the way and focus on the content, which is the real story. Anything with dialogue. My writing slows down so much when I've reached a point where characters need to speak to each other. Also, action or descriptions. Give me those feelings any day. The words just fly into the page when I'm in the reader's head and letting them feel things. I have the opposite problem, where once my characters start talking, they will not shut up. Especially in more humorous fics where there's banter involved. I try to cut things short, but their conversations still run for nearly the entirety of the chapter. Actions and dialogue together. I can write the dialogue, I can write scenes where no one is talking, put them together, and my brain dies. It's just having to hear the conversation, see what the characters are doing, and tying in the background all in one. That's just so exhausting. It's so much happening at once for us writers, and yet for readers, it's an easy read. For me, it's more of the transition into a couple. It's easy to write characters liking each other, but it's harder to then turn that relationship into a couple. Additionally, action scenes and fight scenes. They're easy when you're watching them in like a movie, but describing them and actually making them interesting in a story where you can't see it is pretty hard. Oh, fuzzy feelings, kisses, gentle touches, and that other romantic sappy goodness is my jam. I could write that forever. But action, fight scenes, building suspense, it all feels so robotic to me. First kisses, ugh, they're always so awkward. Makes me want to write genfic forever. It's just so hard to describe it well. In one of my fics, I purposefully wrote the first kiss as painfully awkward instead, just to get around this. Endings and beginnings. All the stuff in the middle of chapters I feel like I have a good grasp on, but the stuff that leads to and comes from the middle, my brain just draws a blank. That final line of a chapter or fic is the bane of my existence. I can breeze through a whole fic without issue, but then I spend an extra hour just fiddling with the ending paragraph or just one single line to wrap up everything perfectly. The explanation of a character's past, because I need to make sure everything makes sense and doesn't retcon other facts already made. For me, anything that has to do with serious emotional moments. Simple platonic bonding? I can write that easy. Familial squabbles or bonding? I have brothers, so it's easy to figure those out too. Fight scenes? I freaking love writing them and excel at making them interesting. Actually, serious emotional scenes that require delicate handling, otherwise they'll come across poorly? Here. Writes to the best of my ability. Proceeds to constantly feel like I wrote it wrong. Trying to make sure every character doesn't sound the same, / keeping them in character. Fight scenes that involve more than 10 people. Don't ask me why I'm so specific. Jokes. I'm more of a situational comedy kind of gal, and I love to write that. But when it comes to characters saying funny stuff, nada. No gift in that department. Evidently smut, lol. I want it to come out just right. Velvet wrapped steel. I struggle hard with flirty dialogue, which is weird because I write smut easily. I'll go back to edit and realize my characters haven't said a word to each other for the entire encounter, sometimes even the entire story. That's when I try to shoehorn in some flirting / dirty talk / what have you, but it just comes out so awkward. Figuring out what characters are doing while talking to each other. All of my fics devolve into talking head scenes because, while I can easily get into the flow of dialogue exchanges, scene and action descriptions are pretty hard for me. Really intense / climactic / emotional scenes or dialogue, an easy 700 plus words in half an hour. Thinking of a title, build up to that scene, the other arcs, days, maybe a week. Angst, confrontation, and arguments. I keep running out of words to use to describe their reactions. Like, how many times can a brow furrow or a jaw clench? Snarky / confrontational political dialogue above my pay grade, which sucks because that's what my fics are about. I have since come to the realization that I have a very hard time writing happy, functional relationship stuff and interactions, and keeping on the straight line without falling off of it. The reason being that I have become aware that I've lived and was raised in such a dysfunctional, almost borderline abusive household that what I found as typical or okay for relationships is actually this terrible learned stuff that I've been projecting into my writing for years. Great for witty, snarky dialogue, not so great for caring, heartfelt moments. Arcs I don't care about that are still vital to moving the plot forward can bog me down hard sometimes. It's like, you know the next arc is one you've been excited about for ages, and it's full of action, drama, etc., but getting there requires you to do an arc with characters you don't even like or care about. Then the problem becomes trying not to rush what you're on because you know it'll ruin the story overall. In the end, at least so far, I've managed to avoid doing that, but sometimes you just wonder. Dialogue. Not because of the flow, but because I haven't had an actual conversation in years, and I've forgotten how. Small talk. Little details and pattern changes when writing a conversation with a little bit of exposition, but not tons of exposition. Motivation of villains and getting into the villain's headspace while trying to make them still easy to hate. The real challenge is that duality. Dream sequences, fight scenes, and torture scenes. As someone who doesn't feel attraction, writing romance and romantic scenes can be tricky, but I have to say it may not be my worst part. My hardest thing to write really seems to be characters I don't connect with. My fanfic goes through chapters that will focus in on different characters' stories and perspectives, and I've tried very hard to just write them out of the story for as long as I can because I didn't want to deal with them. There are certain characters where I just can't get into their heads or figure out their speech patterns, and it drives me insane. Honestly, the intros. Intros are just so damn tough, especially when there's no canon characters in them, so you have to establish a new person or multiple new people with a few familiar elements and hope the readers are intrigued enough to keep going. And I think in general, just transitions, the downtime, early chapters where things are still being set up and haven't started really going yet, because you have to keep people hooked throughout, and sometimes stories just have to move slower at the start. Following up on plot hooks and cliffhangers from a previous chapter, this has honestly stopped one of my fics dead for months since I just didn't know how to follow up. I have this setup, I have a vague idea of what I want to do with the setup, and I don't know what to write or what the resolution should be and how soon it should be. Anyone else struggle with time of day? Like, I am capable of writing in daylight, but once midnight hits, my brain is like, ah yes, this is the time to pound out a couple thousand words worth. This is your inspiration time. I think there's at least one post about that, talking about how people feel more motivated/focused to write in the dead of night when they no longer have interruptions or other things to occupy their mind. I definitely used to love it before my sleep schedule turned me into a morning person. I don't really struggle with anything, to be honest, at least as far as I can tell based on what I wrote. To compensate though, I write at a snail's pace most of the time, and I get burnt out really easily. I'm changing my answer. All of it. All of the writing is hard. Big thank you to my Patreon members, my Little Ruse, Kuski55, Fallen Vexen, Sam, Donka42, I Am a Noodle, John Huang, Fantastic Wreck, Laser Scorpio, Night Avenger, and Mintara. Thank you so much for your extra support on Patreon, it means the world to me. I'm so grateful to have you be a part of my YouTube experience, and I hope you guys are doing well. I wish you all the very best. And the same goes to my YouTube channel members, my Mini Ruse, AD, Taylor Thompson, Foxstar Killer, and Logan. Thank you so much for your extra support. I'm so glad to have you be part of my channel. I hope you guys are doing well. You deserve the best. Keep on being awesome. And to everyone else, thank you too. Thank you for watching. I'm so glad you're here. I hope you enjoyed the video. I would love to know what parts of writing, fanfiction, or fiction in general do you find the hardest? I definitely agree with the comedy one. Let me know your answers. Do you relate with me? Do you relate with anyone else in this video? Or do you have a completely different answer? I'm just glad you're here, and I'll see you in the next video.